Hey everyone, Axie from Wingbits here again. Today we're going to talk about the current version of the dashboard and what the rewards heat map shows, along with the details we see when we mouse over the hexes. Obviously, by the time you watch this video, the dashboard could have changed. So, as always, please check for a pinned comment below the video for any updates. To ensure we don't cause irreversible harm to anyone's retinas, this video will be done with dark mode on. For those that like to live dangerously and stare into the sun, you can switch to light mode after ensuring your vision insurance plan is up to date. In order to present some real-world content for this video, we did have an open call for participants willing to let us use their data, and a huge thanks to those people. We had so many responses that we're only going to be showing a small subset of them in this video. Just to be clear, I won't be obviously naming any of them for privacy reasons, and their specific details will be blurred out. I also will not be discussing the 7-day and 30-day reward charts that you currently see on the dashboard. Those can be discussed on another video in the future if we have a need to make one. So, on to the topic at hand, the rewards heat map. In this view, you will see all resolution 3 hexes, also known in the project as sky hexes, overlaid on a typical map. Keep in mind the hexes you see when claiming a location during setup are much smaller. They're resolution 6 hexes. They have nothing to do with the rewards calculations. They're just the mechanism that's used to define where installs are done and limit other people from installing in the same location. Anyways, the resolution 3 hexes that we see are the reward hexes that we mentioned in the light paper rewards formula, and each one is evaluated for all the contributions every 24 hours. The results of all the calculations are available when you mouse over the hex, as they relate to your contributions. The dashboard map only represents the previous day, and it's not changed by the 7-day or 30-day rewards history options. Those options only affect the reward chart, either on the right on a desktop or lower down if you're on mobile. Again, it is likely some of the information in this tooltip will change as we progress through beta and implement suggestions from the community. So I will only be discussing what we can see now. Let's take an example hex and read it like it was ours. The first line is the resolution 3 hex ID. That's just there for reference. We can ignore it, but at least you know what it is. The next line shows that we contributed about 154,000 messages for that hex yesterday. After that, the percentage amount shows that those 154,000 messages were almost 40% of all the messages contributed by all participants for that sky hex yesterday. Next, out of all the contributors to that hex for yesterday, our station was ranked number 1, first place. If you have multiple setups, it shows the rank of your best contributing setup for that hex. And then finally, it shows our rewards based on the formula. For that hex, it was almost 122 wings for yesterday. Now that we have a handle on what the stats mean, let's go through some of the current participants and their dashboards. We can discuss their stats and how they're doing, maybe even what they can improve upon. All right, so the first user we're going to look at has 2 antennas. One is currently down, has been down for a while. The one on the right is actually the one that's active right now, I think, which kind of stands to reason when you look at the coverage map. You note that the message count is 64,000 for this. They're ranked number 1 in this hex. I know based on the formula that there's more than one person contributing in this area because of their rewards being above about 190. But I see the same thing for this at 37,000. This hex has 231,000. 62% of all the messages received for the day in that hex are attributed to this one antenna. In this case, it was 91%. Over here, it's 96%. As you can tell, the higher your percentage for contribution, the darker the hex colors are. Conversely, if you come way out here in the distance, this user has contributed 0.21% of all the messages. They're still ranked 6, which means there's probably not a lot of antennas out there. One of the future enhancements to this tooltip will be giving you an idea of what rank you are out of how many total, so that you'll know if you're ranked 6 out of 7 or 6 out of 15, something along those lines. This user's probably doing a pretty good job. There's a decent number of hexes. For me, I look at somewhere around 15 or more hexes being covered. If I see 15 or more, somewhere in that range, I start to think it's definitely an outdoor setup. Someone's got it at a reasonable height. There might be some obstructions, whether terrain or building or something like that. And I say that because if you note, if this is the active antenna that we're mousing over right now, most of the coverage is around to the north, the west, and the south, but none really too far to the east or the southeast. So I'm guessing there's a mountain or some obstacle in this easterly direction that's stopping them from picking up more planes. It could also be, and keep in mind for all the future discussions we have here, there may just not be air traffic in some of the other hexes. I know there is, though, in this area. So I'm still sticking with obstructions, obstacles, something is blocking them. But the good note is, through all these, you should see a similar pattern. Good installs are going to have, like I said, about 15 or more hexes that you're contributing messages to. You're going to see probably 2 or 3 hexes that the antenna is doing really well in, contributing the most, rank 1, rank 2. That's just because if you're not in a highly saturated area, you are likely to be one of the top performers right around your setup. That may be within, 30, 50 miles, maybe 100 miles. And then it's going to start decreasing in your coverage the further away you get, because there's going to be other people in those hexes. So for example, sorry we're taking so long on the first one, but I want to get some of the basics out of the way. If we were to look at this antenna and we see that he's doing well here, but not doing so well over here, even though he's rank 2, or let's say this hex, he's rank 4. Not only is the distance pretty great, so he's going to receive less messages, but there's going to be more competition. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. You can mouse around on your own hexes and see what it looks like. If you only see a few hexes, you probably have some improvements you can make. If you see, 15 or more and you've got 2 or 3 hexes that are doing really well, then you're probably doing fine. Don't be concerned if you see someone else's hex dashboard look and their heat map has 45 hexes. Their terrain may be different than yours. There are people who have flat areas around them, no obstacles. Their antenna is up 20, 30 feet. It's above all the roof lines. And they're just going to get great coverage in all directions. It's going to diminish the further away it gets because that's just the way RF is going to work. So hopefully we've understood a little bit about this first user and what we should be possibly looking at in the future. So the next user we have, it's over in Sweden. If you remember from the previous one, there's probably something glaringly obvious here. There's only about 6 hexes being covered. There's a good likelihood that either the antenna itself is indoors or it's not a very high outdoors, or there's obstructions, either terrain or buildings, very close to the installation itself. I know that these hexes are about 100 kilometers across. So based on its location, we can see that in this hex, it's only about 23,000 messages. That was only 11.9% of all the messages submitted for that hex. They're ranked 3 because of that. So we did 2 other people are providing pretty solid amount of messages. Same thing probably for here. Yeah. So we're looking at 16,000, almost 17,000 messages. It's about 10% of the total contributions for this resolution 3 hex. They're rank 4. If this were me, I would look at this and say, I need to probably get my antenna higher, maybe move it to a different location, a family member, maybe my office, if that's allowed, somewhere where I can get it up higher, better line of sight, because I could be doing much better. Of course, this could be as simple as this participant is limited in where the antenna can be placed. They may be forced to have it indoors. They may be forced to have it directly on the side of a building and it's low and being blocked by a lot of stuff. We all have to work within what options we have, but it doesn't hurt to look around, see if there's other opportunities. Again, like I said, friends, family, see if it can be moved. I hope this user keeps improving. This could also be as simple as someone using a small antenna or an antenna that was meant for another purpose. I'm going to go with installation setup. I think there's something going on here with the height or stuff blocking it. Let's look at another one. All right, so this user has 2 antennas. One seems to be online and offline. It's not really providing much coverage right now, at least not in the last 24 hours. So again, the thing that stands out, we're looking at 6 hexes being covered. So I think we're seeing a common theme here. This is probably, again, someone who has a antenna indoors or in a situation outside where it could be higher to provide more coverage. They may be limited. If it were me, I would be looking on how to optimize that. Can I move it to a neighbor's house, family member's house? How can I get it higher? How can I get better line of sight to the horizon? If you do that, your coverage is going to increase like some of the ones we're going to see in just a few seconds. If this is yours and you are not sure what can be done, ask in Discord. We'll be happy to help. We'll be happy to look at your gain to make sure that your gain's set properly, give you suggestions about where to put the antenna based on what you have available. You can do it in the public channels. You can even open up a ticket with us if you need to share some private details. But the community is really great at helping others with their gain settings and some general advice. But we're here if you have more specific stuff. So next. All right, so this participant, I think it's in Iowa. Good coverage map. Definitely in the 15 or more hex range. There's some really good heat map darkness going on around the installation location. So based on that concentration of higher rank, higher percentage contribution around the antenna, I think this user's doing pretty well. It's okay to have your far off hexes have low rank. For example, there's one that's ranked 19. Totally understandable. It's pretty far off. You're only contributing 0.06 percentage, 1,244 messages in 24 hours. It's going to be low. The good news is you are helping because you might be capturing some messages that others are not. Remember that someone can still be contributing 99% of the messages for an area for a hex, and you're contributing 1%, but you may be capturing the 1% that they can't. So we're all working together to create this coverage network. Every message counts. I know the rewards are going to be small in this case, basically less than 1/10 of a wing. And let's look at some of these others. Rank 19, 26, 19, 16, 15, 9, 10. So you'll also notice that these message counts are pretty low. Well, that one's actually not that bad at 15,000 messages. But compare that 15,000 messages over to where the coverage is more optimal, within a few hundred kilometers. And you're looking at over 250,000 messages. You're looking at 133,000 messages, 304,000. Leads me to believe there might be an airport or something right around this area, or a heavy air highway, heavily used. It could also be, oh, there's another 300 some odd thousand. So good examples here. There's a 300 and some odd thousand hex. Participant is contributing 12%. They're rank 4. Compare that to another 300,000. They're rank 1, but they're contributing 33%. So if we were looking at this, we could kind of get an idea that there's probably more people providing coverage in the Chicago or Indianapolis or Michigan area that are reaching into his coverage or her coverage. Whereas this one, rank 1 at 300,000 messages, probably one of the fewer providers on this side in this little section. That's helping a lot. 40% of the messages submitted for this hex, 31%, 33%. So this is like the trifecta area. And I've said this already, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 main hexes that you provide decent coverage for. And everything as it gets further away from that is going to trail off. That's okay. So good job on this participant. Probably a great install, probably great height. Gain is probably set reasonable. Now, I wanted to discuss this participant's setup. It's somewhat unique. As you can tell by looking at it, it's not going to be possible for a lot of people. And over time, this will probably change as more participants join the network. But it's interesting to see at this point that this user is in Nova Scotia, has a setup that is covering all of this intercontinental traffic coming from UK and everything, and then coming down to New York. It is not a lot of traffic, not a lot of planes as far as quantity, but this person is one of the few people that is collecting and submitting this data. So again, these are not big numbers. If I look over here, 27,000 messages, but this user is the only one covering it, because I can tell because there's 192 wings in this example. I should mention now that obviously rewards may change as we work through some of the tokenomics. So if you see a reward in this video and it seems astronomically high or low compared to when you're watching it based on the light paper at that moment, don't worry about it. Just recognize the comparison between the different hexes, not the actual number. So 27,000 messages, another 27,000, 7,000. It's almost like a blur of hexes here. 12,000, 35, 38. So not a lot of messages. Oh, there's 79,000 finally. So not a lot of messages, not a lot of planes, but providing reasonable coverage for this entire area means that this user, this participant, is going to make a lot of tokens, obviously. It's a great install. If the install was inside a house or the gain was really bad, or if it was too low and there's obstacles in the way for the horizon, this would not be happening. It would be limited to just a few hexes around, maybe in the 10 to 15 range, but the water's helping. The signal is being bounced everywhere. The antenna is high enough to receive everything. This is an install we all wish we had right now. As you can tell, when it starts going inland, I know there are some mountainous type things around. I'm not sure if those are providing landscape obstacles, terrain obstacles, but I know that on these further reaches, the rank is dropping to 3 to 4 to 4 to 5. For some of this stuff, they're going to lose out. That's totally acceptable. I couldn't even guess how many hexes this is covering right at this moment. Maybe 40? Amazing. Good on you, whoever you are. All right, so this user's situation is somewhat similar to the previous. There's not a lot of other antennas covering this whole area. This participant has set up obviously a reasonable height antenna, something above roof level. It's the proper antenna. The gain is set properly. And I can tell that because there's way more than 15 hexes being covered. Once you're in the 30 to 40 plus, you've got a good setup. You've got usually pretty flat landscape. You may have some water that you're covering. Remember, water is more difficult to cover because if you're on a coast, not in this case because the water's actually surrounded by land on either side, but in the example of a coastline, only people that are closer to the coastline are going to be able to cover the hexes that are way off in the ocean. So they get a little bit of a benefit. I like this one because while the antenna is installed here and the participant may not always be rank 1 directly around the antenna, it goes to show that you could actually have farther away hexes, in this case, several 100 kilometers, where you are still collecting these messages, contributing them to Wingbits, and you're rank 1. I'm looking here. So this hex is only 2,800 messages. This participant got rank 1 for it. But this one is 24,000. This is 28,000. They're not insignificant message counts. As we get further, obviously, they're dropping way down, 200 or so. Well, oddly, higher counts up here. I have no idea how this mechanic works. Maybe there's a really good line of sight this direction. And as you get over here, there's some mountains or hills that are blocking line of sight. I mean, this is pretty far off. Just to keep in mind, look at the scale down here at 200 kilometers and how far we're going. It's a pretty far ways away to reach coverage. But I just wanted to point out that sometimes you're going to have a lot of messages. In this case, 568,000. Rank 1, right about where your installation is. But some others, even at 800,000, you're not first rank. Someone might have a slightly better setup. Their setup may do great for this local area. But as you can tell, their setup isn't reaching over here because the participant we're viewing has 28,000 messages and is 75% of the contributions and is getting rank 1 rewards. Don't always focus on what's just around you. Providing a good, reasonable coverage by having the right setup, the right gain, the right antenna location and height, those things can contribute to you reaching further hexes that do reward you as well And you may be early on, you may actually get to grab some of those further hexes and be rank 1 for a while. This was somewhat of a unique situation that I thought would be kind of cool to show on the video. This person has installed multiple antennas in the Philippines. They are covering multiple islands. There is obviously some overlap in the coverage, but good on you, participant, for trying to cover a whole place like this. It's amazing. You got kind of a gap over here, but I'm sure you're working on it by now. So in this case, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You'll see that there's an antenna, and then a few hundred kilometers away, there's another. Then, I don't know, maybe 1,000 kilometers away or less, there's a third one right here that we can see. This means that if we look onto the rank, remember that the best antenna will be counted for the rank. So when we see rank 4 here for this hex, that means most likely this antenna, probably not this one, but this rank 4 is the best of those 3 and what rank that antenna is out of all of them. I understand that there's a lot of messages being received when I looked around at some of the numbers earlier. There's obviously some areas that are less trafficked, or the coverage just isn't as great in those areas. But the reach into the ocean, the coverage around the areas where it looks like there are airports based on the traffic count, or major air highways, just very well done. This is someone who's, again, checked locations, done their best job installing their antennas, made sure their gains are set properly. I hope. Gosh, imagine if the gains are not set properly and you can actually improve on this. I guess that's always a reminder to double check your gain, especially if you have multiple installs. It's easy to forget to do one. Double check them, watch the gain video, make sure your weakest signals and your hot messages are within acceptable values. The fourth antenna that's online, I do wonder, I thought about this earlier when I saw this, I wonder if there's a really low amount of air traffic in this location for these few hundred kilometers around, or could the installation be done better? And that's interesting. We may have follow-up videos in the future showing progression over time, but it would be interesting to see, would this antenna be a minimal contributor in the future if someone else set one up nearby with an ideal setup? Right now, king of the hill, but maybe, 2 months down the road, 1 or 2 other people are capitalizing on it and covering the majority of this. And this antenna is no longer at 100%, it's maybe at 10%. So another good reason to check your dashboard from time to time. You can generally notice if other people are popping up, because you'll see your rewards go down, even though your antenna is still functioning properly. You might even see your rank drop. I've seen it from my own stuff where I was rank 1, and about a week and a half later, I was rank 2. Someone has put up a local installation a few sky hexes away from me, and they are providing better coverage for some of the sky hexes I was covering. That's great. I'd rather see my rewards go down and see the network grow, because we need as many participants as possible to provide a comprehensive data coverage. Okay, so this user is running 2 different antennas that are reasonably close to each other. I don't know the exact distance, but they are maybe 20 miles apart. They have somewhat even coverage between the 2, so there is some overlap. But what I found interesting was, again, a great example of being on a coastline and being able to reach far into the ocean. You're capturing transatlantic flights, you're capturing flights that are headed south, or even ones, for example, that are coming from Miami and heading up to Texas or Louisiana to New Orleans. Those go across the Gulf. So you can tell that Florida is obviously reasonably flat. So the number of hexes covered between the ocean and the actual land is going to be pretty decent. This is an example of coverage that some of you might see over in Europe, where there are a lot of antennas currently set up. So you may actually, based on some good installs, have well over 15 hexes that you're covering. But you have just a couple that you're doing reasonably well in. Rank 1 here, rank 3 here, and lower ones around it. Now there's a rank 2. So in this case, some of the far off ones, such as ones in London, these hexes, we're talking 1,300 messages, rank 67. 1,300 again, rank 63. That's a really far reach for this antenna. I wouldn't expect it to have high coverage that far away, but it's interesting to note that it happens. The important part is there's a few hexes that you're doing really well in, and you're covering at least 10 to 15 total. And all the others are just providing smaller rewards, but they add up. So when you come to the point that you want to evaluate your antenna and what is good, what isn't, look for some of the key characteristics we talked about. Are you covering somewhere around 10 to 15 hexes in some shape or form? Do you have 2 or 3 that are doing better than the others at least? If not, is there a way that you can improve your setup so that the coverage is better? Maybe your antenna can be in a different place. You might need to check your gain settings. You might need to check your hardware. If you have any questions, reach out to us on Discord. Open a ticket. Again, if it's personal information that you need advice on, such as showing pictures of your house and where an antenna may be best placed. If you have questions on gain, you can ask them in public channels. People can advise you on that if you could show some charts. We're here to help. We want everybody's coverage to look something like this, if it's possible. Not everybody's going to have the same situation. Some people are going to have physical obstacles, such as landscape or buildings, that are going to block their coverage. But we want your coverage to be the best it can be. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll catch you on the next one.